Other end of the building in downtown Montreal, and with me today we have director from Hair and Makeup, Terry Haig.
Hey, Mark.
Marie-Claude Simard is with us.
Hi.
Lynn Desjardins.
Hi.
And I'm Mark Montgomery. And I also, before we start, we just want to take a little pause to express our own very sincere condolences to the families of the victims in New Zealand and to all New Zealanders for whom this is a very tragic weekend. It's
and
very
Muslims around the world, too.
Well, and Muslims around the world, indeed. Well, for a lot of people, it's a very, very sad weekend. And so we just wanted to express our condolences on that regard. Now, we have also, I'd like to say bonjour to our listeners at World Radio in Paris, and we also have shortwave listeners from the shortwave service in Germany. And of course, we have 97.5 FM in Nigeria who are joining us as well. So hello to you. Now, coming up on this edition of the program, Lynn, let's start with you. What do you have for us?
I'll tell you about the latest United Nations report on the environment, and it says that humanity is at a crossroads.
And Terry?
I have a story about the harsh repression, to understate it, of human rights activists in Saudi Arabia.
Now, you may have also noticed that the three of us are wearing green because, of course, this is St. Patrick's weekend coming up. And Marie-Claude, what do you have for us?
I'll tell you about Irish food, and I'll actually have Irish food for you guys.
Yeah.
All right, I'll have a story from within Canada. The scandal rocking our Liberal government continues and is not helped at all by the latest government move being called evidence of a cover-up by opposition parties. That's coming up on this edition of The Link Online. All right, Lynn, let's start with you. United Nations has issued a new report that says there'll be millions of premature deaths unless urgent action is taken on the environment.
Yeah, and Mark, this was a report prepared by 250 scientists from 70 countries, and it was presented at the Assembly of the UN Environment Program in Nairobi, Kenya this week. It was a comprehensive report. It looked not only at climate change, but many other environmental issues that show the world needs to drastically scale up protections to avoid millions of premature deaths by mid-century. That's 2050. So for more on this, I spoke with Tim Gray. He's the Executive Director of Environment Defense in Canada.
I think what's really interesting in here is that the United Nations Environmental Program has linked what's going on with climate change, so the pollution that's going into our atmosphere, with impacts on land, water, oceans, and biodiversity, which is, of course, plants and animals. And they've demonstrated how all of these systems are linked together and how what's going on with climate change is stressing these systems and threatening to cause them to collapse. And I haven't seen that done as well or summarized as succinctly as I've seen in this report.
What does it say about climate change in relation to human health?
Well, it talks about the potential for millions and millions of people to die as a result of what is happening with climate change as it damages ocean systems, our agricultural productivity, floods cities, causes mass migration, social dislocation, and conflict. So it makes it pretty clear that human lives are directly threatened, and our civilization overall is at peril unless we get ahead of this issue.
What does the report say our top priority should be?
Yeah, they're pretty clear on that, and that is to change our energy system. So that means moving away from fossil fuels to energy systems that are renewable, not producing pollution in the form of carbon dioxide or methane. So in practical terms, that means a move to electric cars, electrify all of our transportation needs, move away from heating our houses with gas or other fossil fuels. I think in countries that have not yet developed fossil fuel powered electrical grids, it means skipping that and going directly to renewable systems that might be dispersed more on a local level.
What are some of the ideas on adaptation to climate change?
Yeah, they're talking about the need to plan for a future where some climate change is inevitable. So for cities where, we know that many of our global cities are built near oceans or on oceans, do not build on land that we know will be underwater. Do not build transit networks that can be flooded. Plan for areas that are susceptible to drought for crops, that those areas are likely to not be able to produce food. So think about the consequences of that with food systems. So plan for some level of change and build infrastructure accordingly to try and reduce the threat of that.
What's your sense of the will to tackle this problem in this way?
Yeah, there's some encouraging news there. We have seen a fivefold increase in the number of climate-related laws on an international scale within countries around the world since the late 90s. So clearly this is coming to public attention. Of course, this is being driven by the science consensus around these issues. Clearly we're not moving yet fast enough to get ahead of this.
So as you heard Tim Gray say, there is hope. The scientists who wrote this report say, and I quote, "The world has the science, technology, and finance it needs to move towards a more sustainable development pathway." But it goes on to say the public, business, and political leaders have to stop clinging to the old ways of doing things, that is, fossil fuels. So number one on their list of recommendations is to stop using fossil fuels for energy and to turn towards renewable resources. It also suggests people eat less meat and waste less food. Governments have to stop allowing projects on lands that are vulnerable to flooding, and we have to stop dumping plastic in the oceans. And the scientists actually went on to say that rather than looking at individual issues like these, that the policymakers need to look at the entire systems and realize also that it costs less to deal with issues now than to deal with the effects of not dealing with them. So there is a link to the full report if anyone wants to read it. That's up on our website at rcinet.ca.
I often wonder, there are so many reports in recent times about how things are getting bad and we have to take action. And I just wonder if in the general population, this is kind of like an overload and they're starting to ignore all these warnings.
Well, that's certainly, if you listen to the full report, the interview that I did with this young man, Mr. Gray, he says that for some people it really is overwhelming and that they just go into denial. However, on the other hand, you see the younger generation, which today, on Friday, when we're live and we're taping, are having demonstrations all over the world.
Yeah.
So
that little Swedish girl.
But you know what? Think about when you were in high school. You may not have any idea of the issue, but a chance to get out of school on the day, yeah, sure, I'll walk out, sure,
No, I
I think it's more than that.
I think they're sincere.
I think that's unfair. Those kids get it. The kids get it. I mean, it's their lives. I mean,
And they're scared.
what is required here, what Lynn just shared with us, what's required makes us doomed, essentially, because, I mean, are we going to, men aren't, the powers that be aren't going to change those things. They're not going to stop using fossil fuels in time. It's 30 years. 30 years is the time limit here.
yeah. Yeah, they're saying by 2050 that people, and they also say that people are already dying
horrible.
of pollution. We have premature
Well, you've got
deaths.
images like of China, for example, and other things. The image that you have on your story there where people are walking around and they can barely see because of the pollution.
That's
and so on.
India, New Delhi, yeah.
And the China Olympics, remember? They had to shut
Yes.
down some of the factories just so they wouldn't get a bad image on the world scene. Sort of thing.
Yeah.
No, the kids, maybe they're voters. Maybe when they become voting age, because the girl she's been nominated for a Nobel Prize, I believe, the Swedish girl who started this movement. When they are old enough to vote, will the politicians, in fact, they're not going to be rational. They just want to stay elected, so they're going to have to pander and play to those young people, and the young people might get some power, maybe.
Another thing this young man said was that there are 5 times the number of laws related to environment and pollution around the world. So he thinks that things are starting to move in the right direction. Politicians are starting to get it. And he also mentions that Canada, of course, the federal government is trying to put a carbon tax on right across the country. There's some resistance from some of the provinces, but certainly there is progress being made in others.
Well, it's certainly, unfortunately, not going to change much in the next little while, so we'll keep our fingers crossed that the people in power,
Well, until Miami falls underwater,
which could,
then
could
maybe
well,
maybe there'll be some action.
Another
Well,
interesting thing this week is that New York, I just saw a news item that New York is planning to build berms to prevent the water from coming in. We saw what happened with Hurricane Sandy.
Exactly, which caused
went all the way up to 23rd Street, man.
Well,
yeah. So while President Trump may be in denial about climate change, there are municipalities and there are states that are taking action.
And of course, if you have any thoughts on this, drop us a line here at the link and express your thoughts to us here, rcinet.ca. Coming up, we're going to be talking about a clampdown on human rights activists in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
And I guess that means now.
All right. So
should I sing the jingle? There's supposed to be a little jingle there.
We dealt with the macro here. Now we're going to deal with a micro problem, which is
in Saudi Arabia,
which is Amnesty International calls it appalling. And it is appalling when you consider it. There's 11 young ladies who have fought for, protested for equal rights for women in Saudi Arabia. For that, they've been held in jail for the last almost year. They've been tortured. They were put on trial last week. A whole bunch of countries in the UN, Human Rights Council or something, said, that's enough, Saudi Arabia. So on this past Wednesday, Saudi Arabia fought back, boy. They showed them, and they put these girls on trial, 11 of them. Two of whom have close ties to Canada. Lujain Al-Hathel graduated from the University of British Columbia in 2013. And Samar Badawi, whose brother Raif is in jail for his blogs. He's been flogged. His wife and kids now live in Sherbrooke, Quebec. So I spoke to Jacqueline Hansen. She's Amnesty International's for Canada major campaign and women's rights campaigner, and to discuss what's going on. Here's what she said.
These are incredible, incredible women who have spoken out for women's rights in a context where it's very difficult and very dangerous to do so. And so their courage is something that I think for Canadian activists is just hard to imagine, because we don't face these same risks when we are advocating for human rights and for women's rights here.
What is it that so terrifies Saudi men about these women? What terrifies them so much?
I don't know. I really don't know. But we know that in many parts of the world, when women are challenging patriarchal structures, when women are challenging patriarchal systems, it generates fear, because what they're doing is they're challenging the existing order of things, and this can make people very uncomfortable. And that's part of being a women's rights activist, is challenging these structures, and that can lead to fear and to negative consequences.
I think back to 1972. I think it was 1972. Those two Irish ladies in Northern Ireland. Mm-hmm. They won the Nobel Prize, I believe, together. They just said to the men, "Grow up. Just grow up," and it worked almost, right?
And that's what women's rights activists are doing around the world. But in some places, when women say enough is enough, it's heard. And in some countries, women say enough is enough, they're sent to jail with no charge. And that's what's happened in Saudi Arabia.
That's part of my conversation with Jacqueline Hansen, Amnesty International Canada's major campaigns and women's rights campaigner, about the women who went on trial this week in Saudi Arabia. And for some reason, I just can't get it out of my mind. This is mankind hitting rock bottom. Can you go any lower than to beat up the women in your society? I mean, I wonder, can you go any lower than that? I don't know. I wonder. What's with these guys? They're idiots.
It's a power thing, I guess, because you can control other people by this. And I did a story just the other day about a Muslim activist organization in Canada, and they're trying to counter the arguments that some people use that say the religion allows men to do this. The religions, they say, look, this passage in the Quran says we have control over you. And this Muslim group in Canada is saying, no, you're misinterpreting the Quran entirely. That's wrong. You cannot use religion to put these women down.
Well, that's an old trick. I mean, Christians use it pointing to one passage in the Bible to justify this and to justify that. I mean, that's an old trick by the powers that be in religions. I mean, how could it be more basic than this?
Yeah.
You don't beat up your women. It's really simple. You don't torture them. You don't flog them. God, bless me. No, I mean, it's just horrible. It's appalling, as Amnesty International.
Well, the other thing, of course, is that with the new leader in Saudi Arabia, everybody was saying, oh, yeah, what's his name?
MSNBC, yeah.
No, the leader is anyway, MSR or something.
Whatever his name is, yeah.
The young guy that was coming in, and they were saying, oh, well, it'll shuffle in a new era because he's more liberal and so on and so forth. But, you know, we had, for example, the murder of Khashoggi, right, under that regime, which is unbelievably shocking. I mean, you murder a man in your embassy, and then you come up with all these bizarre stories to
look. This guy this is a guy. I'll tell you how much of the people he is, man. He was sitting in a city in the Côte d'Azur. I don't know which one, maybe Saint-Tropez. He saw a yacht out in the ocean. He found out who owned it. He just paid $500 million in cash. $500 million in cash for that yacht because he wanted it. I mean, what is this?
Well,
Crazy world.
Well,
Crazy
world. That's another
Oh,
subject.
it's very upsetting for women, for us to
Ben
see
oui,
that in
no.
other countries too.
C'est ridicule.
It's hard to imagine that. I would go.
And again, another subject. If you want to write us with your thoughts on this, drop us a line here at the link on rcinet.ca. Well, I don't know. Should we try a bridge? Oh, that was quick.
Short and sweet.
It's a short break.
Well,
Short and
speaking of world problems, we got one here in Canada, not quite as big by any stretch as the other issues we mentioned, but it is a bit of an ethical scandal that's been dogging Canada's Liberal Party for several weeks now, and it's also tarnished Justin Trudeau's personal image, and it's over alleged political interference into a legal case of bribery and fraud against the Quebec-based giant engineering firm SNC Lavalin. Now, the charges actually date back to 2015, but the story only really hit the headlines when the then Attorney General and Justice Minister, Jody Wilson-Raybould, resigned from cabinet just a few weeks ago, alleging inappropriate pressure to drop the legal proceedings against the firm and instead impose a fine called a Deferred Prosecution Agreement, or DPA. Now, Canada's All-Party Justice Committee had been looking into this case and has heard testimony from Wilson-Raybould and high-ranking government officials. However, the testimonies differ, and in the latest controversial move, the Liberal majority on the committee adjourned an emergency meeting just as soon as it had started, and this led to opposition members calling out cover-up and shame and so on and so forth. Now, I spoke to Jennifer Wallner. She is a political studies professor at the University in Ottawa, and she talks about this latest development and the ongoing scandal.
The lesson to be learned is that much more of politics and decision-making should be held before the public eye instead of behind closed doors. My fear is, of course, this is not going to be the lesson because it's easier to control stories when things are held behind closed doors and control the narrative when things are held behind closed doors. But the lesson really should be that this should be much more in the open and that we should have much clearer rules of interaction between the Prime Minister's office and ministers' offices and also between the Clerk of the Privy Council and Minister's office.
Now, Professor Wallner, this, as you have called it, a tempest in a teapot, has actually attracted international attention. Several news agencies from abroad have said that this reflects badly on the Prime Minister, who has been known to be a bit of a moralist in his speeches and his stand on feminism and Indigenous affairs and open government and so on and so forth. And also the OECD has made a couple of comments. What would be the concern of the OECD in this?
So the concern of the OECD, which, you know, their statement, in fairness, is pretty light. It says that they are concerned by recent allegations of interference, and then they right away applaud Canada's response. And this is actually interesting that the media is not picking up on this, that the OECD, in fact, in this very short statement, saying that they're concerned about the allegations of interference, and they reinforce the fact that under the conventions of the Anti-Bribery Convention, we cannot use national economic interest as an argument to defer prosecution, which is true. But they right away say, Canada launched 2 major processes, and they are encouraged by this activity. The OECD is encouraged by this activity. So this very short statement, the thing is that it's very rare for the OECD to make statements about activities in Canada because, generally speaking, Canada's activities appear to be above board. Now, the Prime Minister also and the Liberal Party generally does have this issue where they end up framing things in very moralistic terms. We watched Canada deal with this with its recent attempted negotiations with China in international trading agreements. And this is, I think, a cautionary tale to future politicians. It's the old adage of people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. We should never pretend to be better than what we are, and we should recognize the fact that there are mistakes and faults and serious blemishes in Canada. And when politicians moralize too much, it opens them up to this type of criticism.
And that was an excerpt of my conversation with Professor Jennifer Wallner, political studies professor at the University of Ottawa. And it looks like what they've done is they've scheduled the next meeting to be a closed-door session. No public invited, no press invited, and so that's what she was saying.
As they normally are for procedural questions.
Yeah, and so that was the idea of having this behind closed doors. And they also scheduled it for the same day the budget comes out. And again, the opposition is saying you've done this on purpose to try to deflect from this scandal by having the budget, which of course any budget, when a government releases a budget, it's a very big news story. So they figured that they'll hold this next meeting behind closed doors, and the news media will be covering the budget and not be worried about the scandal, and maybe that'll help to deflect the issue. But I don't think it's going to work. What do you think?
You're the neutral journalist imputing motives.
No, but that's what the journalists do, right? They say, what's the reason behind this? What's going on?
Columnists do that.
Columnists, yes. All right.
So we'll wear our columnist hat for a little while.
And our green today. Because today is, we're coming up to St. Patrick's Day.
On Sunday, which is a big deal.
I keep explaining to you, it's on the 17th, Montgomery, not the 15th.
Yeah,
this is the Ides of March. This is the Ides of March, so beware.
I'm turned to hear. Speak.
Beware.
Caesar is turned to hear. Do you know why Caesar was turned to hear?
Buckos. Okay.
No, be quiet. Listen. Do you know why Caesar was turned to hear?
Julius Caesar.
Why he what?
Why he was turned to hear. Right. He said, "Speak, because Caesar's turned to hear."
Yeah.
All right.
Because
well,
he was
you guys
deaf in the one ear.
Argue. I have food.
This is because
celebrating the Irish. We're like in a pub.
What do we have here?
Here we have a braised beef with whiskey, Guinness, and honey.
Oh my!
And this is made by the chef at McGibbon's Pub. It's an Irish pub in Montreal. So,
do the cameras close in on this? Can we close in on this? There, look
at
there we go.
Beautiful. It looked much better when I actually had it yesterday at McGibbon's in Pointe-Claire. I spoke with the chef in charge of all the kitchens of all the pubs. This is an Irish pub in the Montreal region, very popular, and they're expecting thousands of people Sunday, because Sunday is the parade and it's very, very popular in Montreal. So I spoke with Chef Christophe Ritou, and he talked to me about Irish food in general and this dish in particular. So maybe we should listen to him.
All right, let's hear your report on this then.
Yeah. Where are we and who are you?
Well, at McKibbin's Irish Pub in Pointe-Claire. I'm the chef at McKibbin's Irish Pub of our location, and my name is Christophe Ritou.
Okay.
And I've been working at McKibbin for the last 20 years. And this week is a big event for us. It's St. Patrick's Week. Sunday is St. Patrick's Day, but all week we do special events all week, special menus, with different dishes, Irish dishes, old classic dishes. And that's it. We're just, ready and working.
Well, tell us about St. Patrick's Day in McGibbon's.
St. McKibbon's it's like Christmas for us. It's the biggest day of the year, it's the bigger week of the year. So we have to be prepared. And people expect to eat, to drink, lots of Guinness, lots of food. and they want it fast and good, and that's why they come on McKibbin.
So, and you make a special menu for the week, right? For
Yes, we have corned beef, Guinness-based corned beef. We have a Guinness beef pie. We have the Irish salmon with some crab on top and some root vegetables. We have a grilled Irish cheese sandwich with green herbs and some bacon and some tomatoes. We have like a Guinness beef pie, and we have something else which I forgot.
And those are all recipes you made up?
No, they are classic recipe where we change them to a McKibbin's way, basically. McKibbin's way, you know what I mean?
You improved
And
them.
we improved it. I think they improved. I think they're better. I think they're better.
Okay.
Yes.
And what's in front of me? It looks
Well,
delicious.
it's a Guinness corned beef, served on a bed of braised cabbage with potato, fingerling potato, parsnip, and carrots. With the Guinness reduction with honey on top.
Wow, that looks good. So if I was going to make that at home to have that special sauce, what do I have to do?
It's just like, it takes time. It takes about 4 to 5 hours. You have to boil the corned beef for like 2 hours with some Guinness and some beef stock and some wine and some seasoning.
And whiskey, you said?
Whiskey at the end, we put the whiskey after.
Okay.
After we take out the meat, we flambe the meat, we put the meat in the oven in the cooking juice, and we add more whiskey and some honey, and we put it in the oven for like 2 hours.
Okay.
And after that, just serve it, let it sit for an hour, so we seal the juice, and after you slice it, you make some braised cabbage, same liquid, same potato, you put your potato inside the same liquid, all the flavors, it's good. You reduce it, and that's what you have at the end.
So the key ingredients in the traditional Irish food would be...
And we put Guinness and whiskey in there, we have both.
Guinness, whiskey, and potatoes.
Yeah,
from-
potato,
Okay.
and cabbage and everything. Yeah.
This is wonderful. Thank you. I can't wait to taste it.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me just have a little piece here. And the sauce is so good.
It's good.
Parfait.
Okay, French.
Français.
Okay.
Bonjour. À qui ai-je l'honneur?
Mon nom c'est Christophe Ritou, je suis le chef de McKibbin Cook.
Here we go.
All right,
So
well, that
you guys can taste it, and we even have Guinness beer because, of course, when I tasted it yesterday, I had a big tall
Well, you
glass
have
of
to have
Guinness
Guinness,
beer.
of course, yes.
So Chef Christophe Ritou is a very interesting man. He's born in Montreal, in France. There's a Montreal in
Montreal,
France.
France, yes.
Yes. Then he specialized in Cajun food, and then he moved to Montreal, and now he's been for 20 years a chef at McGibbon's, and he loves Irish food, and he says he's Irish at heart, like
so many. Everybody's
Yes.
Irish on St. Patrick's Day.
Yes, that's what he says. He says all Montrealers are Irish on St. Patrick's Day, and even people take days off to celebrate, like if it falls on a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
Yes.
The bars are full.
And there's a huge parade in Montreal, certainly on
Yeah.
Sunday, the actual day, which is March 17th.
Yeah, this.
And what is it? It's the 190th something.
Third biggest in North America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the longest. It's the longest consecutively
Exactly.
held parade, I think.
This year is the 196th edition, and it's organized by the United Irish Societies of Montreal.
We should
Yeah.
say that there certainly is history. A lot of Irish came and settled,
Yeah.
Particularly during the famine, came and settled and were founders in Montreal. A good portion of them were Catholics, and so they married into French Canadian Catholic families.
Yeah.
So there's a whole heritage.
yeah.
But as we said, on St. Patrick's Day, everybody claims to be Irish.
Well, even on the Montreal flag, the Irish harp is a symbol
Yes.
to represent the Irish fact in Montreal.
the trèfle, I think.
It's a harp.
A harp. It's a harp.
Harp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was a. How do you call it?
So
Trèfle?
No, the
Yeah.
thistle. The thistle is
Not-
England,
yeah.
and then
No, Scotland is the thistle.
Scotland is a thistle. So what's
Yeah.
England?
A rose.
A rose.
Rose.
Yes.
Et la fleur de lys
For the
Quebec.
French.
And now there is the native pine.
Pine tree in the middle.
They've had it, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone should come to Montreal, go to McGibbon's. No, go to the parade, then go to McGibbon's, and have some.
Or any Irish pub.
Yeah,
'cause
there is
they'll
Irish
all
pub. There
be
is
there. So we're
Fantastic.
celebrating St. Patrick's Day this weekend in Montreal, and there'll be a lot of this being drunk, I think.
Yeah, I think it's going to be nice
Cheers.
too, isn't it?
So happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Cheers.
Cheers.
Do you like
the
the
rebels.
taste of a... Do you like the taste? Doesn't it taste good? It's a...
So for Terry and Marie-Claude and Lynn and Pierre Dutil and Leo in the control room controlling things, and our technical staff
all the
today
guys.
who's joining us for the first time in this this particular show, we wish you
Yeah.
all the best, and
And
until
thank
next
you,
week,
guys.
take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We're going to enjoy this now. This is wonderful. Did you?